This may look like hard work to some of you, but it's the way I like to relax. When the hurly-burly of films and city life gets too much for me, I'm away to the Highlands with my salmon rod. That fellow you saw with me, that's John Grant. He works at the local whiskey distillery. He's away for the fish now. 9.5 pounds or my name's not John Lorry. Now for a wee drabbing. When I've been onto a salmon like this, I like a whiskey to celebrate. And when I'm in Tomatin, I drink the local brew. Never heard of it? That doesn't altogether surprise me. It's a malt whiskey. Most of the Tomatin distilled is sold in bulk for blending. But Sandy up at the Freeburn always keeps a bottle for me. People go on drinking their own particular brand of blended whiskey and never give a thought to why they prefer it. You see, the blenders depend on malt whiskey like Tomatin to give the whiskey you buy its own particular flavour. This fellow was drinking blended, but I persuaded him to try a dram of Tomatin. He didn't know that the whiskey he usually drank was a mixture of grain whiskey and malt whiskey. You can see he appreciated the flavour. I tried to persuade him that malt whiskey distilling was no longer a cottage industry, but I don't think he altogether believed me. If you think the same way, just keep your eyes and ears open for the next 10 minutes or so. The Highlands of Scotland. That's a load of peat. And that big white building in the distance is the Tomatin distillery. Don't forget the peat. It's important. And so is the water from this wee burn. All the water used in Tomatin whiskey distilling comes from this stream. Don't ask me why. That's one of the mysteries of distilling. No other water will do. Burn water and peat. That's two things for you to remember. Now for the third. Barley, pouring down ton after ton. This isn't just any old barley. For one thing, it has been cleaned and dressed. Before it's bought, Mr. MacDonald, the manager of Tomatin, has a look at a sample of it. The barley is tested for three things: moisture content, and germination, and malting qualities. Mr. MacDonald has 38 years' experience in whiskey distilling, and all those test tubes and pipettes only confirm his opinion. He hasn't been wrong yet. Moisture content, germination, and malting qualities. High-sounding words, but not so difficult. Before going to the silos, the barley is dried. If it had a natural moisture content over 16%, it would start growing. For germination qualities, you must see what goes on in these three conical containers called steeps. Nine tons of barley from the silos are run in. Those metal rings are perforated to allow air to be pumped through them. Water from the burn you saw is added. Temperature, 52 degrees. No more, no less. Mr. MacDonald's son, John, is the under-manager. He supervises every operation in the distillery. He's already made a test run with this consignment of barley and found out most things about it. On this card will be recorded everything that happens until the barley becomes finished malt. Temperatures, time in the steeps, drying time, and so on. That's John Keel, the head maltman. There's nothing he doesn't know about this process. Oh, but I was forgetting. Germination. The steep is full of water, soaking each grain of barley to start it growing. Any dead corn or chaff the dressing machine has missed is floated off into this chamber. Dead corn can't germinate. Air is pumped into the mass of barley, giving it oxygen to help it grow. You remember the metal rings. This propeller device is a sparger. It pumps on the barley from the bottom where it would die for lack of air. The water is changed according to the sensitivity of the barley. Now, that is a job for experts. The last lot of water is drained off, and the barley starts to become malt. It's collected and spread on the floor by the maltman. The depth will be varied according to the rate of growth. You see, barley corns are growing, living plants. I like to call this the nursery garden. And in that context, Bill Dodds has green fingers. He works it forward with his wooden shield, giving it air. In fact, he looks after it with every bit as much care as an orchid grower in Kew Gardens. The temperature on the floor is checked every 4 hours. In a hospital, they do it to see if you're getting better. In a whiskey distillery, to make sure the malt is healthy. After about 8 days on the floor, the malt is finally inspected. Do you see the rootlets? Well, inside the grain, the process is changing starch into sugar. That's what these two have been after. And germination must be stopped before the process has gone too far. This will be done by heat in the drying kiln. Bucket elevators carry the malt up to it. This drying business sounds simple, but in fact it's controlled very carefully. Down below the kiln, a fireman sets an automatic thermostat to control the heat of the fire. That's some of the peat we saw being carted from the hilltop. And that's coke. The rich tang of the peat smoke curls up through the wire mesh floor of the kiln above, leaving its flavor with the malt. Now, that's just one of the secrets of Tomatin malt whiskey. You're thinking perhaps that the under part of the malt will dry quicker than the top, but you'd be wrong. This mechanical turner makes certain of that. Mind you, they're still watching the malt as though it were a hothouse plant. This graph traces the heat of the fire and drying kiln minute by minute. The malt has been in the kiln for 18 hours. The rootlets are still there, but they'll be cleaned off in the dressing machine before the finished malt goes to the storage bins for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. The time has come to stop the drying. The record card and a sample of the finished malt are taken to the lab to make sure that everything that should have happened has. At Stuart Gordon, the head mashman cleaning his beloved mash tub. Incidentally, in case you're worried, nothing will affect the quality of Tomatin, but if all those times and temperatures aren't kept to, the quantity might be less. And with everybody crying out for it, that would be a terrible shame. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, finished malt. Before it reaches the mash tun, one of the most modern in the business, by the way, 3 things happen to it. It is weighed, cleaned again in a dressing machine, and milled to this fine powder to make it easier for the converted starch to be absorbed in water. It's now called grist. Well, you can't keep an actor out of a picture. Stuart pulls the lever and the grist pours into the mash tun, all 400 bushels of it, with water added. Nearly 5,000 gallons of heated burn water to turn it into a thick mash. It stands for an hour, and in that time, the starch is converted into sugar. Lots of water are put through the mash at a temperature of 156 degrees the first time, 172 degrees the second, and 196 degrees the third. This third water is called the sparge and is used for the first water of the next batch of grist. This residue is called draff and is sold for cattle food. It encourages cows to give more milk. You'll be wondering what's happened to the thousands of gallons of liquid Stuart Gordon's drained out of the mash tun. It passed through this underback and is pumped to the wort receiver. Wort is the new name for the liquid. Meantime, John Grant, the head tunroom man, has washed down this 10,000-gallon vat, or washback. Yeast must be added to induce fermentation. 10,000 gallons of wort have been run in with the yeast. Proportion 1 part yeast, 85 wort. The wash, that's a new name again, is left to ferment under John's watchful eye. By the way, the wort has been cooled to 72 degrees in this heat exchanger. After 36 hours, an estimate can be made of the strength and quantity of whiskey that will be distilled. That's a saccharometer. John is quite an expert at the salmon fishing, but then, to all these Highlanders, fishing and whiskey distilling are part of their heritage. This makes me look a bit of an expert, but John really knows what he's doing. Now begins the process of distillation. In this wash still, the wash is heated until it vaporizes. Fire by oil, the cleanest and most modern fuel. Vapor from the wash still. In this tank, there's a coil of metal called a worm, in which the vapor is cooled back to a liquid. Here it is running through the left-hand chamber of the spirit safe. Hydrometers on the right-hand cabinet help Duncan Ross, one of the stillmen, to check its alcoholic strength. The liquid is vaporized again in the spirit still. Condensed again in the worm, it passes this time through the center chamber of the spirit safe. The hydrometers help the stillman decide when the liquid should be diverted to the spirit receiver. It is now pure Tomatin whiskey. Mr. MacDonald prepares to run the new spirit into casks. Casks are important. That's a sherry cask, but it's not penny pinching to use second-hand material. For one thing, the casks are made of oak. From the sherry-soaked walls, the spirit will take on the rich amber hue that distinguishes whiskey. Stored in bonded warehouses, the whiskey will be left to mature. By law, this spirit is not Scotch whiskey until it has been in cask for at least 3 years. As a matter of fact, it is one of the particular advantages of Tomatin that, as a light malt whiskey for blending, it matures more quickly than many others. With demand always on the increase, Tomatin has kept pace with the times. Not much left of the old cottage industry and all this modern machinery. But don't forget the men. They're craftsmen, every one of them. Born to the tradition of whiskey distilling that their forefathers began centuries ago. And no use trying to distill Tomatin with any water, but from this distillery comes 3/4 of a million gallons of whiskey in a season. And the blenders depend on malt whiskies like Tomatin.